My name is Clara, and when I was 17, my mother remarried, changing our lives in ways I never anticipated. My mother, Elena, had met my stepfather, Richard, at a charity event she had organized. Richard was a businessman, well-spoken and charismatic, with a knack for making people feel valued. He was drawn to my mother's warmth and resilience. She had been a single mom for years, raising me on her own after my father's passing. Their courtship was brief but intense, filled with candlelit dinners and long conversations. By the time they announced their engagement, it felt like Richard had always been a part of our lives. With Richard came Lucas, his son from a previous marriage. At 18, Lucas was confident and effortlessly charming, with a way of drawing attention without even trying. He had deep brown eyes, wavy chestnut hair, and an easy smile that seemed to disarm everyone around him. Despite our initial awkwardness as new family members, Lucas and I quickly grew close. At first, our bond was simple and innocent. We teased each other about silly things, stayed up late talking about our dreams, and leaned on each other as we navigated the complexities of blending families. But as months passed, I began to realize that my feelings for Lucas were evolving into something far more complicated and difficult to admit, even to myself. One evening, a few months after our parents' wedding, Lucas and I found ourselves on the rooftop of our house, a spot that had become our sanctuary. The stars were scattered across a clear sky, and the faint scent of jasmine from the garden below filled the air. We were sitting close on an old blanket, sharing whispered jokes and stories. Lucas's laughter was warm and infectious, and for a moment, I allowed myself to forget the turmoil inside me. Gathering my courage, I turned to him. "Lucas, I need to tell you something," I said, my voice hesitant. The lightheartedness in his expression shifted to curiosity as he looked at me, his brow furrowing slightly. "What is it?" he asked, his voice soft and inviting. I took a shaky breath. "I think I have feelings for you," I admitted, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might drown out my words. His expression froze, and I immediately regretted saying anything. But then, he reached out, taking my hand in his. "Clara," he began gently, his tone filled with a kindness that both comforted and stung, "you're amazing, and you mean so much to me. But I don't think I can give you what you're looking for." I forced a smile, even as my chest ached. "I understand," I said quietly. "I just needed to be honest." After that night, everything felt different. Though Lucas tried to act as though nothing had changed, I couldn't hide my disappointment, and the space between us grew. Our conversations became more surface level, and the late-night rooftop talks stopped altogether. I threw myself into school and friends, hoping distance would dull the sting of rejection. Meanwhile, Lucas began excelling in college, making new friends and even dating. Watching him with Sophia, a vivacious girl he met on campus, felt like pouring salt into an open wound. I told myself it was for the best, but my heart refused to accept it. One evening, Lucas knocked on my door. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. When I nodded, he stepped inside, his usual confidence replaced by vulnerability. "I broke up with Sophia," he admitted, sinking onto the edge of my bed. "It just wasn't working." I sat beside him, unsure of what to say. He looked at me, his eyes filled with something I couldn't quite read. "Thanks for being here," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, reaching out instinctively to rest a hand on his knee. The warmth of his skin beneath my palm sent a ripple of longing through me, but I pushed it down. "Always," I murmured, meeting his gaze briefly before looking away. The room seemed to hold its breath as we sat there, the weight of unspoken words pressing down on us both. Slowly, our bond began to mend. The tension that had once separated us faded, and we found ourselves slipping back into the comfort of our shared connection. One night, Lucas suggested we return to the rooftop. It had been months since we last sat under the stars together, and I hesitated before agreeing. We settled into our usual spots, the city lights twinkling below us. "Do you remember the last time we were up here?" Lucas asked, his tone reflective. I nodded, my cheeks flushing at the memory. "It's hard to forget," I admitted. He reached for my hand, his touch warm and steady. "Clara, I know I hurt you," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "But I've missed this, us. You're my best friend, and I don't want to lose that." His words filled me with a bittersweet relief. "You're my best friend too," I replied, squeezing his hand. "And I wouldn't trade this for anything." As the silence stretched between us, I found myself leaning closer, drawn by an invisible pull. Lucas's gaze flicked to my lips before returning to my eyes, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed to pause. But then, he pulled back slightly, clearing his throat. "We should go inside," he said softly, his voice tinged with regret. I nodded, my heart heavy but resolute. Though my feelings for Lucas never fully disappeared, I came to understand that our relationship was far more valuable as it was. Over time, I learned to cherish the rare connection we shared, one built on trust, honesty, and unwavering support. As we sat under the stars that night, I realized that love comes in many forms, and sometimes, the most meaningful relationships are the ones that don't fit conventional definitions. Lucas taught me the importance of vulnerability and the strength it takes to face uncomfortable truths. Life doesn't always give us what we want, but it has a way of leading us to what we need. And for that, I will always be grateful.